If you think that you're safe, then you're not safe. In fact, even when they censored him, I distinctly remember the leaders of Europe condemning big tech for this, they came down hard on big tech as well. But where is the end game with big tech? Oh no, it's very simple. It's very simple. If we don't work out how to solve this issue, then our ideas will go extinct.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rory O'Connor, and welcome back to Macquarie University Liberal Club Sunday Sessions. I'll be your host for this evening, and my co-host is Andrew Kremen.
Good to see you, Rory.
Good to see you too, legend. Tonight's topic is mainstream media and big tech censorship. We have here our guests, Chriscoveries and Jammal. Good evening.
Pleasure to be here.
Good to be with you, everyone.
Perfect. So just before we kind of get in, I just want to let all our audience viewers on Facebook know that they can comment down below, and hopefully we'll be able to answer questions later in the show to our two guests this evening. So the first thing I'd like to do is toss it over to you, Chris. Would you be able to explain a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me on, everyone. It's good to be with a group of individuals trying to discover something more around where we are and what we're trying to do in this world around us. Now, what I do is quite simply, I like going to protests. About a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I realized that a lot of the stories I was reading about what was happening at these protests just wasn't true. It didn't match the clips that I was seeing online. So I started going to them because I wanted to listen to them myself. Whether it's BLM or trans or Trump rallies, it doesn't matter what it was. It just didn't match what happened when I started going to them and listening and talking to people. And to be honest, it was just nice. It was nice to listen to someone that I shared the same city, the same suburb, the same street, the same job that I shared so much with. Even though we might disagree on so much, it's nice to listen to these people because while we might disagree on whatever the key issue is that the banner is, I just started sharing it. And that quickly became news, reporting, live streaming, uncut, uninterrupted, an entire protest from end to end. People started to really like it. Where it really started to pick up was when lockdown protests began, but that's a whole other story. I live stream protests end to end, uncut, honestly, because corporate media either is unwilling or unable to do the same.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I'll come to you now, Joel.
Yeah, look, I got involved in this fairly recently because I really wanted to make a change in what's going on, and I really wanted to see, things turn around and us to also have some more honest media. We had lockdowns last year, and when they came out, there were two sort of entities that I really had a problem with when it came to this sort of stuff. And it was really that the mainstream media weren't doing their job. They weren't reporting the facts. And also the politicians weren't really doing a good job with that sort of thing. And it was very frustrating because it was like you're trying to get a message out, but the mainstream media, who are meant to be the powers that actually hold, politicians accountable, they don't. And so the answer became very clear to me that we need to solve that and we need to replace them. And that's why I'm grateful people like Chris are around to cover protests on the ground, just like Real Rukshan in Victoria. And I'm thankful for, a bunch of other alternative media that have risen up in the meantime.
Well, Joel, if I can ask, so about some of the people that you've interviewed, so people like George Christensen, like they offer all manner of alternatives that the Australian public is not necessarily aware of. Why is it that the narrative does not seem to accommodate for these things? If I might ask, or in your experience.
How so? Do you mean why is the mainstream narrative so overbearing? Is that what you mean?
It's more than just overbearing, but it doesn't cover the full gamut of opinions. So, for example, the protests, especially in Victoria, being presented as far right extremists. I'm sure you've seen the pictures of those Sikh construction workers. At the same time that the narrative sticks.
Yeah, look. No, look. I was just going to say. I think what it is a lot of it is temperamental. A lot of these people, they just aren't used to having different opinions around them, and so when it comes to them actually listening to this sort of stuff, they find it literally repulsive. They find it repulsive that you exist. They find it repulsive, and they look down at you, and that you have these opinions. Now, the problem with that is they're in an echo chamber of themselves, and that sort of explains why they had the reaction that they did to things like, you know, the Brexit referendum. How could this happen? The vote must be wrong. You know, we have to do another vote, or we have to have a people's vote. And the same thing with the first election of Donald Trump in 2016. They were like, how did this happen? This is completely wrong. The Russians must have done it. You know, they just cannot believe that, you know, normal people think this way. Why? Because they're in such an echo chamber. They're in such a bubble that they only hear the same opinions over and over again.
But what's the purpose of the bubble? Like why? I mean, you've mentioned that, you know, they all have the same opinions, but like news organizations are quite large. There's bound to be dissenting opinions. There's bound to be people who could, so, you know, people like Chris Ullman. You know, why are there so few Chris Ullmans?
Well, look, you won't see. Again, it goes back to a temperamental thing. Ultimately, you won't see people like me or you or anyone on this call bullying someone on the left for their opinion openly in person. Whereas on the left, they seem to have forgotten those values, and they have no problem, you know, nigelating people. So it seems as though it's a method of warfare. Think of it this way: when you've got one side that's willing to break all the rules in order to win and to achieve power, then there's certain things that the other side won't actually do. I mean, I won't lie, cheat, and steal to win this battle. I just won't do it. Whereas the other side will. And unfortunately, the situation we're in right now is we're left with, you know, feckless people that don't want to stand up to the establishment and stop this kind of thing.
Presented as a far right extremist. I've interviewed you previously, and I've come to the conclusion that you're more of a Buddhist, if anything else. Can you talk to us about that article?
It was hard. It was hard to be kind of thrown that way by, sure, it's a tabloid, but Channel 10 ran it as well, and a few other outlets. And to face that being in the news that way, the language that came out of it, being described as this man and his measly 8,000 followers. Well, I actually think that's a huge number of people to be able to reach. If I'm 50 people in a church room, wow, 50 people are listening to me. This is huge. 8,000 people are watching me. That is absolutely staggering. So this is something more than just writing a crappy headline. Why is an idiot with a selfie stick, as I so often describe myself? Because really I am. Okay, I'm just going out there and trying to honestly capture it. Why is a walking tripod worthy of such ridicule? Something's not right here. How was my time in the sun going through this article? It was hard. A lot of friends and family, whatever it is we're about right now, we believe what we read. And they look at that and they say, oh, Chris, what was with this? And the number of phone calls you have to field, and you have to try and explain top to bottom, why do people listen to me? Well, they listen to me because they can no longer trust large corporate media. And why can they? You've got to go through so many different layers of explanation that to try and explain where we're at, if you haven't been watching for the past 10 years, you can't. So inevitably, the number of times I've had friends and family just go, oh, Chris, I just saw you on the news. Thought I'd give you a call. After you're trying to dump all of this on him. And it's that simple. Oh, you're on the news. I don't know. It's too much. It's too much to bring people up to speed, and they just get confused and shut down and go, oh, you must be crazy. But really, I'm just a walking tripod.
I can certainly appreciate how difficult that must have been for you. I know the mainstream media really trying to brand you as this kind of, really outside the field, far right person, and trying to discredit you and shut you down. What do you think this means for freedom of speech? Because obviously you're not the first person this has happened to.
Guys, it's been 5 years since 2016, which is when the media lost its mind with Donald Trump. 5 years is a long time. It's the best part of World War II. It's longer than World War I. The world changed on its head through both of these periods. And I'm not saying this is anywhere near as serious, but 5 years is a long time. 2001 and 2006, September 11 onwards, a fall of the Soviet Union, 1995. 5 years, yet we're still stuck trying to get up to speed with what's happened to our change in the way that we get our news. Do we have freedom of speech? Freedom of speech has always been limited, and freedom of speech has always been a hard-fought turf war over what you can say. Left, right, up, down, it doesn't matter what it is. You get as much freedom of speech as your tribe is willing to take. It's always been this way. It's always been limited. Take the debate around conscription leading up to the Vietnam War in Australia. People wanted to debate whether we could have conscription or not, and it was called sedition and treasonous to even question the topic. That changed as we saw the body count rise from the Vietnam War, but you get as much freedom of speech as you're willing to sacrifice for, like any other freedom. Are people willing to sacrifice and put their liberties on the line for that freedom? Right now, the answer is not really. Not a majority of people, a small minority who will care about it, but the majority of people just want to get by and afford increasingly expensive housing and cost of living.
If I were to cut back to you, Joel, a lot of left-wing people online, quite often when freedom of speech is brought up, they quite often say, we don't have freedom of speech in Australia. That's not a thing. It doesn't exist. That's an American thing. What's your understanding of freedom of speech in Australia?
We have implied freedom of speech. So in our constitution, there's the implied freedom of speech, and you've got some certain international agreements that we have with foreign countries, and that's pretty much as far as it goes. We have a lot of restrictions on speech. We have a lot of negative, we have a lot of legislation that restricts our speech, whether that's the stuff that's come out of the same-sex marriage debate, and that's not very helpful. But we don't actually have a First Amendment here, like the Americans do, that protects our freedom of speech. And until people recognize that, then maybe they're going to just keep walking around thinking that they can say what they want. They can't. We've also got some of the strictest defamation laws in the world as well. So anyone can be sued by anyone under Section 18C of the Discrimination Act, which means that we can basically, if I say something even slightly offensive to a trans person, or based on race or sexual orientation or religious views, then anyone can just sue me. And it's like, wow, that's really low. We don't have freedom of speech here. We don't have a situation where we can talk about what we want. And so the answer is no, we don't have freedom of speech, guys.
Can I jump back in with an experience on if we say we do or don't have speech? It's about how it's being policed. And if I can share my screen of my experience covering a protest a few weeks back on Albany 1st. The reason I go to protest is to listen to people, to platform people who might have crazy, nutty, whatever ideas, be it the Black Deaths in custody, who might be completely wrong in their stats, or in these vaccine protests where people want to talk about vaccines. And one of those people are the organizers, who has a following of thousands of people and thousands of people to get into the streets before, is Mikhail. At Victoria Park, there was no time with public order and riot, illegal protest. There's no time to interview people because they're mainly getting faces smashed into the dirt. What happened here, if I can share what's happening here, is public order and riot guys was watching my stream back in the police operations center, and I could hear what you couldn't hear on the stream was all of the radios of the police all crackle saying, Chris, Bruyne, live streaming, Victoria Park, protest action group, intelligence, giving the word out that I was feeding intelligence to a protest action group because I was putting Joe McHale on stream. And one of the public order guys walk over to me and say, yep, that's him. You're platforming one of the protest action organizers, and immediately starts speaking to me to prepare me for, if my media credentials don't stand up, to be arrested. Make of that what you will around freedom of speech, but I learned that you can't, on your stream at a protest, speak to the people around this group. And I think Joe's face says it all there on whether we have freedom of speech in this country.
That's right. That's rather scary to hear, and especially if we have no avenue especially into the mainstream media, to even tell our stories. What exactly is the trajectory of our country? What exactly is the end game? We do have an audience question. Chris, why do you think the protests have been quieter in Sydney than Melbourne? Is it different policing tactics?
First and foremost, yes, that's the single biggest factor. You shut down the taxis, shut down the car parks, shut down the trains, roadblock everything. You're going to be filtering out 80% of the protesters before they even get there. Process them one by one, detaining them, finding them, sending them home. It's done. If you let them group into a group of 1,000, there's no way to grab each one away from that group is going to end up in a highly violent, highly volatile situation, and you end up with a Melbourne tradie window smashing event for each one you want to get away. But processed one by one, it's trouble-free. So that's the single biggest factor. Second, we don't really have as big of a protest culture here as Melbourne. Every time I've been down in Melbourne, I've been on a tram on a Saturday. Oh, everyone off the tram, it's time for a protest. It doesn't matter what the cause is, generally social left protests, but there's so many protests that happen there. Thirdly, our housing prices are far more expensive. So there's a very different culture when it comes to the impacts of risking your protests, your life for protests like this. It's just a different set of approach there. So, but yeah, first and foremost, different approach to policing. And in a good way too, I'll say, we haven't been mass deploying pepper spray. We have not been seeing the mass deployment of hard gear like in Melbourne. We haven't been seeing the indiscriminate violence. I'm happy to describe it that way. I know that's not objective to say. The indiscriminate violence we've been seeing in Melbourne. By comparison, if you need to arrest someone in Sydney, Public Order Rider has been going one-on-one with hands, grabbing people with hands. They haven't been using batons. They haven't been using rubber bullets. They haven't been using sprays. It's been one-on-one. There's just something more human and humane about grabbing someone to arrest them than shooting them in the back with a rubber bullet.
I don't know about you, but some of the clips that I saw, it honestly made me think of The Dark Knight Rises. It was that dystopian. I don't know if you've got a comment for that, but you've got like an armored car. You've got police in file, and they're firing on people who are unarmed.
Yeah, we go back to it's a bigger question about how should we police discontent. Clearly protest is legal. Any type of public gathering is illegal. But once that is decided that gathering is legal, okay, what do we do about it? How do we then approach it? Do we, as happens in Victoria Park, divide a group of 200 people into a group of 100 each, and then into 50, and then into 25? Okay, that's one option. Start dividing the group one by one. What happens in Melbourne in terms of tactics is they'll just smack a blockade on one end of the street and a blockade on the other end of the street and close it down and kettle them for hours on end. What are you achieving? Tactics, once you've decided that it is illegal, and there's a whole debate about whether protests should be illegal or not. That's not the point. Tactics change everything. Rather than facing officers in hard gear, you have people in loose clothes using hands, not batons, not tools. And that's the change of perception. Why you didn't get the Dark Knight Rising feel in Sydney was because, you would have felt a mass police vibe, but something about armor and something about tools used changes everything.
I think I take a different approach as to why Sydney's protests aren't going ahead. Part of it is I don't know if you've copped this much, Chris, but the harassment from police. Sorry guys, I'm having a punch up with my audio. The harassment by the police to members of the media and anyone who they suspect are organizers is a thing. You chop off the head of the snake. It is somewhat effective. And unfortunately, I've been lumped in with my as an organizer for some reason of the July 24th protest. But there's so many different things as to why Sydney's not a big protest place. Part of it is to do with the culture of Sydney, as Chris was saying. But the other part of it is, Sydney is fighting back in different ways. One of which is we've got lawfare. So we've got a lot of cases coming up this week. On the 30th, we've got GNB solicitors. We've got AFL solicitors, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, I think on the 30th as well, we've also got John Larder's case, who's representing, the interest of all these paramedics. And I think that's also this week. And on top of that, we've got a lot of, as you guys probably know, in the Liberal Party, a lot of internal turmoil going on in the Liberal Party with the branches, and a lot of discontent people with the Premier. And those are avenues that, people can outlet their anger at the Premier and the state of affairs. And so in New South Wales, it's mainly the Conservatives out here doing this stuff, whereas down in Victoria, they do have a protest culture, but they do also have a better grasp of how to organize protests. The protesters down there are a lot more, it doesn't take a genius to see this, they're a lot more organized. The fact that they've picked up on things that have been used in the Hong Kong protests, like using umbrellas, it's a no-brainer. These are simple things New South Wales, protests haven't picked up on. The concept of releasing the location of your protest an hour before the protest, it's genius. I mean, I don't know why, to date, every single protest in New South Wales hasn't utilized, that strategy. And this is how I'm not a protest organizer, because if I was, we wouldn't be making stupid mistakes like that. And so I mean it when I say I'm not a protest organizer, but I pick up on these things. And the problem is, if you fail too many times as organizing a successful protest, because we've only really had one successful protest, one or two, and that was the 24th of July. Now, the problem is there's a morale game also happening at the same time. Not everyone's going to show up to a protest if they know there are avenues like the lawsuits and the internal stuff going on in the Liberal Party and ICAC. No one's going to turn up to a protest. Why should they? They've got other things going on. Also, it's high risk. Everyone they're hearing about is getting smashed by the police. I've been visited by the police 7 times at my own home residence. It's not fun. Imagine going out and grabbing a coffee and getting a call from your family members saying, come home, the police are here. They're asking for where you are. And then when you get home, you've got to show them receipts that you were actually getting a coffee. They look at your bank transactions. I'm not kidding. I had to show them that. This is the sort of thing that I'm talking about. And a lot of people are shocked that these scenes in Victoria and sometimes New South Wales, that were, this is something out of, the Dark Knight Rises movies, Gotham burning to the ground and this revolution sort of happening. Well, this was all foreseeable. This was all foreseeable, and it's very frustrating. And I don't mean in a conspiratorial sense. There was legislation that we could see. If you look overseas, you can see the sort of way other countries are going. Anyone that's shocked by this hasn't really been paying attention. They must have really been focusing on what's going on in front of them.
Well, certainly, I think that's one of the concerns in Australia. I'm not sure how politically involved a lot of people are. So, as you were saying, I would encourage people to get involved, to join political parties, to have that voice within the party. But we do have a question here from an audience member. It says, both of you have been vilified by the likes of Crikey, Channel 10 and the Daily Mail. How should we push back, or how can we push back when you're coming up against these media conglomerates?
Do you mind if I start, Chris?
Hey, go.
Look, the reason they write about you, the reason why they write about Craig Kelly is because they need views. The reason why they still write about Pete Evans, despite the fact he's been taken off, is because they need views. And this is the entertaining thing. Mainstream media are dying. They're dying. Chris's following is only growing. My following is only growing. Rukshan's following is only growing by 1,000%. And I guess that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree that I realized that there was something significant to what I was doing once I was worthy of being ridiculed in that way by a tabloid. Why is some guy sitting alone by motorway services worthy of such news? Wow, this is something significant. And another side is there's so much demand for authenticity. Coming back to the question, which was, how do people push back against it? Well, keep watching, for one. Be rigorous, just as rigorous in your nutritional diet of your food and drink as you would with your information. Now, that also means that you need to eat all of your fiber and vegetables. And that sometimes means reading things you don't like to hear. things that make you feel unpleasant, that is not just a candy-filled diet. Because what happens if you eat nothing, not candy, it's not so good for you. Same with information as well. So try and have a balanced diet there. At the same time, be rigorous for what's going to be good for you in terms of what is true and real and honest. And that can be hard. Look for people who are going to give you information that say sometimes, I was wrong about this, because that's a really good sign. And that's something we're not getting out of journalists anymore. And that's why I avoid labeling myself as a journalist altogether, because it's just loaded. I'm a news reporter. I go there, I tell you what happens, I film it, a walking tripod, and I tell you what you can't see and hear. But journalism is just such a toxic rhyme with pious, church-like authority. They're priests who seek to tell you exactly what happened, and that your truth isn't true, and that everyone has a different version of the truth, and anyone who has a different one is just wrong. Well, you've read the good book, very good, but we were all able to read the book. Live streaming is like the printing press, where we no longer need your Bible that only you have a copy of to see what happened there. That's changed now. And that means that the holders of the truth before are going to get very unhappy when they can get access to that news, and we don't need you anymore.
Those are good words. I've got a question from Adrian. What do you make of Australia's current defamation laws that make it harder for others to defend themselves? We'll start with you, Joel.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'll be honest, I don't know the defamation laws inside out. I just know that they're a lot tougher. But yeah, I mean, it's basically created an environment where anyone can take pot shots, you know?
Chris, anything more to add?
Look, we're all looking for consequences on people that don't seem to agree with us. There's the old term that consequences have actions. Fine. Well, does speech have consequences? That's something that's changed a little bit. The old, can you scream fire in a crowded theatre and get away with it? Well, we had plenty of court cases both in the US, UK, and Australia about this, and the answer is no. All right. How much further can we go? And we look at someone like Friendly Geordies, who seem a lot of appreciation and attention. Can Friendly Geordies suggest that the Deputy Premier is corrupt? It's not the first time that a journalist or news commentator has suggested this, but it is the first time that one said it without the backing of a large major corporation. We're going to find out, thanks to the $1 million that everyone's donated to him, whether I like him or not, is not the point, whether an creator, comedian, whatever you want to call him, he's a very influential person, is allowed to claim that the Deputy Premier is corrupt or not. What do I think of the defamation? It's real. Do we want to change it? What do we change it to? Do we go to an American system? I don't know, but we're finding out.
I have an audience question here that says, are there any journalists left in corporate media that you guys trust or find tolerable? What are your thoughts on that, Joel? Is it too late for the mainstream media? Has it gone too far to the left? Is it, no good anymore, or is there any hope at all?
Oh no, they follow the money. So if the money is telling them to go a certain way, then that's where they're going to go. See, the problem with mainstream media right now, and I'll make this point quickly, is they're getting a lot of funding from government right now because they're not getting as much money from advertisers because we're obviously in lockdown. Now, the problem with that is if you're getting money from government and you're being funded by government, then we're in a situation where if you're getting millions of dollars, then you have to make sure that you stick to the government line on this stuff. That's the problem.
Something I'll credit is 7 News' coverage in Melbourne. I got to credit Paul Dowsley. He has been in the wars down there, rightly or wrongly, and he's got a heavy cross to bear in that one thing that unifies most protests these days is a distrust of media. And when he was struck by a can, I expected that most reporters come out and say, look at these violent thugs doing violent thuggish things, because if you're throwing cans at reporters, yeah, you are a violent thug. But he didn't immediately go to brand it that way. He said that these guys are passionate, they've been locked in their homes, and that it must be very difficult for them. A reporter who's just been donked on the head by a can of drink is having empathy for the protesters. That is remarkable. That is not something that we're used to seeing. And I would suggest almost unique this man is almost unique. And the fact that I am calling out someone for having just a little bit of empathy for the protesters, just like I more than once have had empathy for the Black Deaths in Custody protesters and more, says something. That something might be changing. Maybe it's just this one man, but unlike 9 News, unlike 10 News, some of the 7 News reporting in Melbourne has been remarkably neutral, maybe just for a week, but it's something, and credit where it's due.
If I can ask a bit about the trajectory of where we're going in regards to big tech and media monopolies. So we've established that like they control almost the vast majority of the narrative to the point where basic elemental questions about sort of any topic are not asked, and they persecute people who are trying to ask them. Where exactly does this go? Especially like in regards to big tech. That big tech, they're run by companies overseas, and yet they can take down my local member who is Craig Kelly. They can deplatform him. They can ban him. They can prevent him from talking to the people who support him. Like, where does this go? What is there an end game, Joel?
Yeah, I tried to warn people about big tech censorship. If you think that you're safe, then you're not safe. In fact, even when they censored him, I distinctly remember the leaders of Europe condemning big tech for this. But they came down hard on big tech as well. But where is the end game with big tech? Oh no, it's very simple. It's very simple. If we don't work out how to solve this issue, then our ideas will go extinct, and you can lose. And a lot of people don't want to recognize that point, but it's true. Dr. Robert Epstein, he is a man that he voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and he testified before Congress twice after the 2016 election, and he said that anywhere from 2.6 to 10.4 million votes were swung from Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton in that election due to big tech manipulating search results, manipulating, and hiding certain algorithms that would promote exactly what Hillary was doing. Let me give you an example. In the Google search engine, if you search Hillary, it'll make some suggestions for you. Hillary Clinton, first female president. Hillary Clinton, will win 2016. Hillary Clinton, blah, 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 blah. These things, you may not think they have much of an effect, but Dr. Robert Epstein, who did vote for Hillary Clinton, said this stuff is swinging votes, and this is how many it is. Anywhere from the rock bottom being 2.6 to 10.4 million votes. And just to put that in perspective, guys, yeah, sure, America is, a nation of 330 million people. But you need to remember, in 2016, the margin of victory for Donald Trump was only 80,000 votes across 3 states. And look, in the aftermath of the 2020 election, Dr. Robert Epstein also came out and he said 15 million votes minimum were the amount that was shifted from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. And, these are things that not conspiracy theorists. I was just reading just then the Time article from early this year, called, the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 presidential election. Anyone should search that up, search those words up, because it shows you exactly how there was a shadow campaign against the president and how big tech played into that. If you think that can't come to Australia, it's already here. There's an organization which I did an expose on 4 months ago called Reset Australia. It's an organization that has a former parliamentarian from our New South Wales Parliament under Gladys. It has a board member that was worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016, and it has someone who worked on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as well. Now, these are people that are committed to combating foreign censorship and foreign interference in our elections, along with COVID misinformation. I'm sorry, but I doubt their intentions, because the funding that they get is from overseas entities as well, like the likes of which that also back Black Lives Matter. And when I look at these organizations, I just have one question for them. What role did you have in getting Craig Kelly banned? Because they say their stated goal, and they're proud of it, is to get people taken offline and to lobby with government and big tech to basically point out where the Jews are and say, they're under that floorboard, they're behind that wall, they're here, they're there. And I've been trying to. No one's covered Reset Australia since I did my expose. No one's covered it. I'm going to do another video soon about them because a new set of financials have come out for them. But this is a problem, guys. And Sky News is only just discovering it now because they got their first 1 week ban on YouTube, and that hurts their bottom line a lot. But the reality is this is not going away. They can swing Australian elections if they choose to, if they have not already. And if the Australian people and the Australian politicians think that this is something that's going to benefit them now, you've got to be careful what you wish for, because there'll come a day where you'll rue the day that you didn't go after them. They can go after big tech right now. They need to take advantage of the opportunity, and they need to stop wasting time. This is we've been aware of this for over 6 years.
Anytime a piece of new technology comes to the fore, it changes us. It changes our beliefs, our understandings of the world. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. A new magic has come to us in the shape of a small handheld tablet that we all carry around with us. It shapes what we think, it shapes what we do, it shapes how we spend our time, who we care about. And now that we're all stuck inside, it's the only window we have to the outside world. Many people focus on the 1930s as a key point in time. I more look to the Reformation. It's funny, I was never a particularly religious person, but we're going through an awfully special time. When we look at the charts of changing religion in Australia, we look at this chart and it says no religion here is opening up to some 30% of Australia, 25%. Well, I'm asserting to you from the protests that I attend, that's not known religion, that's a new religion. It's a power vacuum, which can be filled with a new technology, just as we did before. Remember these 95 theses? Anyone who studied a little bit of religious history? A brand new technology helped this spread like wildfire. Without it, it would have just stayed nailed to one church door in Germany and gone nowhere. The writings of a madman, Martin Luther. We'd never heard of it again. But he didn't. He went to someone and went, oh, he's got some bloody good points. I said, look at what he's had to say here. I agree with what he has to say. Well, I want to tell my friend. And rather than a share button, he took it to his friend who's got this brand new cool thing called a printing press. How cool is that? He didn't need to write it out. He could copy it in just 20 minutes. Wow. That's amazing, isn't it? 20 minutes, you got a new copy. It previously would have taken you all day to write that out. Now it can spread quicker. We've got a problem. Those who controlled the information before, the big tech of the day, are now got a brand new power vacuum they need to smash on the head, because the Catholic Church at the time was, as we judge it today, viciously corrupt. And big tech is trying to stake their new claim. They've got a power vacuum which they're trying to claw for, because the demand, and I'll assert, the demand for religion never disappeared. The supply has. And that's what I see at many of these protests, is that they have their own scriptures, they have their own words, they have their own rituals, they have their own groupings. Some of the protests, they have their own public mass, public hearings. I know some people criticize what I have to say, that some of these acts are religious, but there is a vast demand for some form of religiosity in public life that is simply not being supplied by any of the options on offer. And that's what we're kind of living through, because at the end of it, to me, and this is a personal opinion, most of religion is a set of values, a code. And that's what I see most people following. It's just about a code of life. And that's what's been changing. And that's why I'm rhyming the role of big tech is becoming a role of a new value system.
I can certainly appreciate that view. I know a lot of people have made similar comparisons between religion and Extinction Rebellion. It's a common one that's kind of brought up as a new kind of cult, some people have called it. I do have another audience question here, though. It says, Joel, you mentioned before that a lot of the mainstream media is following the money, and you said they were getting support from governments during this lockdown period. One of the questions is, do you think the media will be on its last leg then once we come out of the lockdowns and they're no longer receiving that money?
No, because then they'll be getting their advertiser money again. So, the eyes have to go somewhere. But this is the thing, though. What's changed is alternative media has grown a lot. You know, the amount of people that have grown from this, they're going to start having advertiser money thrown at them as well. This is the thing, advertiser money, there's a lot there. You know, there is a lot there. It's a big pie, and you know, there's enough to pay for alternative media and mainstream media, just like the last time, because it's eyeballs. But this is the thing, though, as alternative media rises, you don't see. Can you tell me the last person you heard that said, "I used to watch alternative media, now I watch mainstream media"? It's only flowing in one direction, this traffic. Exactly. And it makes it's laughable to think that people are like, oh yeah, I found it really insightful, that mainstream media. I think I'm going to go get some more of that. It's like, no, you feel depressed after it. You feel like you don't know what's going on. They talk to you like you're idiots, and they don't explain things to you. You know, whereas you go to Real Rukshan and he gives you like as much as you want. It's like a Netflix subscription. And then that's the thing, you know, and also we bring it down to the people's level. When I explain a topic like the preferential system, or you know, whatever the topic is, I bring it down to the people's, you know, view. I don't talk to them like they're idiots. I say, guys, this is the situation happening with the Arizona audit. I did a video last night explaining why it's important, how it works, what to focus on, and you know, people appreciate that. They appreciate that intellectual honesty. That's something that's missing right now, and I think it's going to be different after we come out of this lockdown. I think that, you know, they're going to still be there. Of course, they're still going to be there. They're businesses. And if they're looking like they're not doing so well, just like CNN in America, which is collapsing in real time, you know, then they look to sell it off. But at this stage, it doesn't look like any of them are going to be sold off.
No, completely.
Sorry, continue, Chris.
No. You make a great point that I don't see traffic going the other way from independent back to mainstream. It just doesn't satisfy the same taste. I'll say this again: authenticity. What people are seeking is authenticity in their understanding of the world, because the glitzy, glammy productions, the highly edited 6 o'clock news with the full face of makeup and the wonderful camera setup, something about it just no longer satisfies people's understanding. It doesn't seem real. We've got movies, and so much of TV news feels like a movie set. It's too perfect. Most people can tell a fraud when someone's lying to them, and that's what they see when they see Channel 9 say, protesters have brought shame to our proud city. What are we watching? Is that true or false? It might be true or false, but I'll be the one to work out if that's true or not. I don't need you to tell me. And it will accommodate some of the people who need to be told that way. We believe what we're taught. But for people who that's not enough, they're looking for something else. And they're going to Joel, and they're going to myself, and they're certainly going to Rukshan, who for most part is a silent commentator. He says nothing during most of his streams. He is a walking tripod. And we want that. We crave that because it's real. How can we question that the camera feed is false? It's not. He's saying nothing. And we'll still see plenty of criticism about it when people will then write these articles and say that, oh, he pans the camera away from certain things. Everyone has a slant. Everyone does. And most of at least between Joel and I, we admit that we have some slants. We have opinions for ourselves. We have opinions. And once we declare that and we declare some of our views, people go, okay, we know how to box you. We know how to understand you and relate to you. Most of the so-called journalists and say, oh, I'm completely objective. Like the Robert Avardi I saw in the middle of the protest. I tried to interview him. He said, oh, I couldn't possibly express an opinion. I have to be totally objective. 5 minutes later, he's walking straight up to a protester who he doesn't like, saying, you want to go me, mate? You want to go me? Doesn't add up. It's not authentic. It's not real. We don't believe you. And that's why I watch something else.
Yeah. Can I just play a question? Just a question from an ABC reporter to Barney B. Joyce. Now, I know you guys have seen this, but it's really entertaining because it demonstrates exactly what Chris was just saying. It's that, you know, we distinguish between, okay, these are the facts, and then this is where our opinion is. So it's okay to have your opinion, but just make sure it's clear where the facts are and where it is. But then you get this ABC reporter, and this is her loaded question. This is what you call a loaded question to the acting prime minister of the country.
Prominent right-wing politicians in the country. Are you prepared to show leadership and call out and condemn the violent nationalist, racist, anti-vaxxers and far-right extremists who've been part of the protests in Melbourne this week?
Oh yeah, it's just a fact. It's just a fact. They're just racist and violent extremists. It's just, like it's not debatable. Are you going to do it or are you not? Are you going to join with them? Are you going to be a fascist? It's like you'd never see Chris ask that question because it's an idiotic question. And this is the thing: they're getting crazier. Like they're getting crazier. And I'm not saying that because she's a woman. That has nothing to do with it. Like they are becoming more and more desperate for views, and these questions are unhinged. Like you would never see, Maria Z on an Instagram say that. That is not an assumption you make about a broad group of people. That is so, it's just bad journalism.
Well, I wonder if it's a little bit more than bad journalism in that, I've studied a lot of cultural Marxism, and one of the things about it is that it rejects essentialism, total rejection of essentialism. Rather, truth is what is written onto something, and here we have various truths written onto people. The narrative is king. And because of that, it's made academia dangerous. And I wonder if we haven't really lived in a time where academia has been especially dangerous, at least to the vast majority of of concerned citizens. Would you agree with that, Joel? Or?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's an element of both. I mean, part of it is the unhinged element of the media just looking for chasing ratings, like CNN, Orange Man bad. But the other element of it is like, because you've always got to top the emotion, so that's why they're sort of ramping up like that. But the other element of it is that they truly believe this crap. They truly believe it. Like the thought of them going down there and standing among these masculine men that are, screaming out that I'm losing my job, I can't feed my kids, I can't this, I can't that. The fact that they can't actually connect with the people like that, it demonstrates to you how much of an echo chamber they're in. They truly believe this crap. But to an extent, there is an ideological, bent to it that you're alluding to, which is, in these universities, they are smearing their opponents, because if you smear opponents, then you don't have to wrestle with their ideas. And that's something Jordan Peterson's often pointed out.
I can see
I've
that
spent a lot of
some
time.
of the comments in there. Sorry to cut you off, Chris.
Wait, Chris has got something to add?
Academia, universities, this is where we're raising the next generation of thinkers, deciders, people in positions of power, privilege, everything like that, all that whole class. But something that's missing from even just the short 15 years ago when I was considering going to university, seems like a world away, were those thinkers. The stereotype of the the V-neck shirt and the preppy look and the real people leading Chaucer in the main quad and thinking about the issues of life. What happened to them? Because I have spent a lot of time at student university protests going, where did they all go? They're not
Right
here.
here. Right
And
here.
I found some of them. I spoke to them, and they want nothing to do with these activists, nothing at all.
Yeah.
And speaking to them, they're lefty as anything, no problem. But they'd speak to me. And I've reached out to David Brophy, I've reached out to Patrick Gibson, I've reached out to so many of the academic researchers to try and platform them. I've even said in my emails to them, if you like, I'll say nothing. You can just say anything you want for 5 minutes, pre-recorded, and I'll just platform you. And you just get absolutely no reply because clearly I'm not the right type. They don't want to be heard by your people. They want to be heard by their people. Lee Sales is not speaking to Barnaby Joyce there. Lee Sales is speaking to Annabelle Crabb. So you're thinking that you're speaking a conversation between people. No, Lee Sales is having a conversation with Annabelle Crabb about what she'd say to someone she doesn't like. And Annabelle Crabb will have a conversation with, take for example, Michael McCormick, and she'll be speaking to Lee Sales. Go a level deeper. It's not about you. It's not about Barnaby. It's about each other and status within their own media circles.
I was just going to say, I can see some comments down below the video, and also a few being sent to me where people are making comparisons between movies. One of the ones being brought up is Anchorman 2, in it where he's competing with his ex-wife. She's trying to do a proper professional interview, but he cuts to a car chase, and that brings in lots more views, lots more excitement in that, as opposed to the truth, facts, something that's actually happening. Another comparison people are making below is V for Vendetta. where he blows up the Old Bailey, and then the news reports it as it was a scheduled demolition. Nothing went wrong, nothing to see here. Just thought I'd mention that, some interesting things there. I do have another question though. It says here that I watched a live stream of Avi Yamini covering the protest in Melbourne, and I noticed how Avi tries to restrain the content by saying, don't say certain things, like anything that implies violence or going against the COVID consensus, because Facebook will block the live stream. So the question continues and says, how do you try to avoid certain obstacles when you are using mainstream media or, social media?
Well, there's lines, and Chris has switched on to this sort of stuff. There's certain lines. I mean, around about the time of January 6th, there were about 4 different things that we worked out were going to get us banned. There's anything COVID related. You can't talk about that. You can't talk about Ivy. I can't even say the word here. You can't, talk about who actually won the 2020 election. You can't actually talk about, the events of January 6th and share any of the violence. And you can't talk about, there's a whole bunch of things. And once you work what those things are, work out what they are, then you can actually be like, okay, I've got to put that on Rumble. I've got to put that on Telegram. I've got to put that on these safe platforms that I can talk about these things. And unfortunately, I learned that the hard way. I got a lot of YouTube strikes. At one point, I lost my YouTube account, which sucked, 12,000 subscribers. But I got that back eventually, long story short. But the point is you adapt and you overcome. Now, why do we use the mainstream platform still? Why is that? It's a great question as well. I mean, I use them, and I know Chris uses them, because we siphon people away and we manipulate the algorithm, and you use it and take advantage of it to get people off of these platforms onto alternative media platforms, because a Telegram account that has 20,000 followers is better than a Facebook account that has 100,000 followers. Way better, because you cannot be deplatformed. More people will get your notifications. You are not being, shadow banned or censored or whatever. Even saying those phrases might get, this page, censored, by the way, which I shouldn't say. But there's all these little things. Now, this is the problem. Freedom, like Dan Bongino was saying, is like putting a volleyball under the water or a basketball under the water. Eventually, it's got to come up, and you can only suppress it for so long, because even God himself recognized that, freedom of choice, freedom to love who you want, freedom to whatever, is something you shouldn't be compelling people to do, and so for the governments and big tech to have the arrogance to think that they can mandate this stuff and fight against human nature is hilarious.
If you want to reach people, you have to use the platforms that are there. So we use the large platforms that are there, and we self-censor all the time. I know I've seen Joel self-censor, and I certainly do as well. On the violence topic, 2/3 of my views come from people who just want to see blood sport. I know that. They just want to see people get their faces smashed in, whether that's protesters or police. They love the full body action contact, because without sport, without anything else, they love violence. If it bleeds, it leads is the old topic. And I know that. Even though what I'd rather covered is a quiet, calm conversation about the protest issues that it was. But that's where I want to. Part of the reason why I appreciate getting the view counts of large mainstream media is it introduces me to amazing people, other content creators, other influential people, other celebrities like Joel. I love being able to reach other people like that. And that's what the numbers bring to me. Not necessarily, the fame comes with the whole Daily Mail thing, but if there was another way to reach that, I would. But I'll tell you another platform which there is freedom of speech, and it is kind of scary. I stream on Bilibili. This is the second largest Chinese live streaming platform. It's right up there with QQ. Yeah, freedom of speech, China. But over here, you want to talk about BLM? Yeah, we can talk about BLM. You want to talk about ivermectin? Yeah, you can talk about ivermectin. You want to talk about race, ethnicity, sexism, trans lives? You want to talk about all of this fun stuff? They all do the time, and they are off the rails. I can't talk about what some of these people talk about in China. I could not mention it right now. And there they are talking about it and debating it in China, which should be no freedom of speech, but it is. You've got to take a 40-step questionnaire before you can post any content there. You want to make sure that you're not going to insult the party. So you can't insult the party, and they're going to test you to make sure that you've got the right thinking before you do. But once you're there, talk about whatever you want, as long as you don't criticize the government.
Exactly. And I mean, I use TikTok. I mean, even on the side, it's not the main platform I've got. It's the smallest one I've got. But I use TikTok because it's like The amount of people that have said to me, I saw you on TikTok. It's shocking how many people there are. I didn't realize it was as, you know, because it pushes people's content in a way that the other platforms don't. I don't understand why. But you use the tools that you have. It's the ideas that you need to get out there. As long as they don't censor your face, you're okay. But you just got to use what you have in front of you. And for those people that are staunch and saying, no surrender, we're only using Telegram, I'm sorry, you're closed-minded and your ideas are going to go extinct. Like, you've got to adapt with the times, and you've got to be smarter than people that are trying to censor you. You've got to work with what you've got, and you can't just wish you were in a world that you're not. They're coming after you. They're banning your ideas. They don't want you to exist. They're trying to erase you. Very soon, they're going to start going after your bank account details like they're doing in America, that Joe Biden's pushing. And people need to recognize that they do not like you. They don't want your opinions to exist. They want there to be one opinion, a monolith, just like with the CCP and how they cram down and how they spend a quarter of their budget cramming down on their own people and surveilling their own people. That is what these same people have. They are the same temperament of person, and they have to be stopped. And if you want to stop them, you've got to work with the tools you've got.
Speaking of that one opinion, I'm going to keep going one more. Speaking of that one opinion, anyone on this channel right now is going to be judged by a reductive argument that everyone watching this, we're all agreeing on the same, not just the same things, but we all think the same thing. No, every single one of us that have different views on this. There's plenty that Joel and I disagree on. There's plenty that Andrew, we have diverse opinions. But back to that whole Annabelle Lee Sales talking to each other thing. If you're seen together, you're part of the same thing. Therefore, you must be whatever label we want to smack on you and move on.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to mention. I wanted to remind everyone that we're not just talking about, extreme, crazy ideas here. We were talking about people that are even left-wing are even being censored, but particularly people that are even slightly right-wing. These are the people that are being censored. These are not far-out ideas. Some of these ideas are genuine concerns people having, frustrations being expressed, and they're being silenced and censored. Over to you, Andrew.
Yes, so just very quickly, I know we're at time. Can we quickly plug both your channels, Joel?
Give them a shout out, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Where can we find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look for the chairs behind me. I'm in a tuxedo. Type Joel Jammal, Joel Jammal on all platforms, and you'll find it. But I'm also pushing Turning Point Australia. That's a new platform that I'm pushing because my one's being censored too much. And yeah.
And Chris?
Chriscoveries, a portmanteau of Chris and Discoveries. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Bilibili. I'm on VK. I love all these platforms. Get it out there. Why not? Reach the Russians. There'll be a whatever platform it is. Follow me on Twitter. Everyone on Twitter is other Twitter people, so be careful. It is a schoolyard clapback kind of attitude. Best not to go on Twitter. It's pretty awful. I don't go there either. But more importantly, if you like the content that either Joel or I create, drop us a DM. Certainly, I love getting DMs from people directly on how it's influenced you in one way or another. I want to hear if it's been good or bad. You also get to hold us accountable. So Chriscoveries, a portmanteau of both, a live stream protest, and sometimes I sit here and try and break down what the hell is going on.
Perfect. And I'd also like to plug ourselves, of course. This has been the Macquarie University Liberal Club. This is one of our Sunday sessions. We have these videos like this with different guests on every Sunday at 4:30. Tune in on Facebook Live. We'll also be uploading videos to YouTube as well. So I've been your host, Rory O'Connor. My co-host has been Andrew Kremen. Our guests have been Joel Jammal and Chriscoveries. Thank you so much and good night.